Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way, so you don't have to. Join our host, Lacey Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Hello and welcome back to Confessions of a Terrible Leader. I'm your host and former terrible leader, Lacey Nelson. And have we got a show for you today? I am so thrilled to be welcoming our podcast producer extraordinaire, Mary Skop, to the show. She honestly was not too enthusiastic about getting on that other side of the podcast at first. However, she quickly realized how much value she has to share with all of us. A little bit about Mary. She's a professional musician. She is a mother of 5 children, and she also has her master's degree of collaborative piano and is pretty much an all-around miracle worker on many fronts. So, Mary, welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here. I'm so glad you agreed to be on this side of the mic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lacey. It is really exciting to be here. Yes, definitely a little hesitant and nervous at first to be on this side of the podcasting, but very excited nonetheless. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we have a really rich discussion in store today for our listeners. But before we get there, let's set a little contextualization for them. How in the world does someone with a master's degree of collaborative piano end up as a podcast producer for the Transcend Leadership Collective? What was that journey?
Yes, that is a great way to describe it. It was indeed a journey. I was finishing up my master's degree May of 2020. We all know what was happening then. Mm-hmm. And I had all these ideas about what the end of, my master's degree might look like. I had a big graduate recital planned, and the plan was to graduate and just kind of figure out what was next after that. And so, of course, again, we all know what was happening, May of 2020. Yep. And I suddenly found myself in a completely different way of life. I was teaching piano at the time. I taught private piano lessons for about 25 years, and I almost immediately lost about half my studio due to students either just financially, like a parent lost a job, something drastically changed. So things completely changed. And of course, my bread and butter is playing piano for people, for choirs, for vocalists. All of that was all of a sudden no more. You could not sing. So lots of huge changes. And I found myself kind of what I would like to describe as floating in space for a while. And I just became aware I was going to have to supplement my income almost right away. Yeah. So some searching, lots of worrying, which is just a nice way of saying completely freaking out. And one of my dear friends reached out to me saying, I could have a job for you if you're interested. I help produce webinars for the building design construction industry based in Chicago, and they need someone to be an event coordinator for some of their webinars, some of the overflow work. I had never done a webinar in my life, barely even knew what was this thing called a webinar. We were all really just kind of getting into the virtual world and how that was going to become an extreme everyday part of our lives. Yep. But I was desperate and I was grateful for the opportunity, and I jumped right in. So I learned all about organizing events online, running webinars, and I learned a lot about the building design and construction industry, which was, totally different.
Yes. Yes, it is.
And it was a very interesting, I was there for about a year. And about that time, you and I had started communicating back and forth, just kind of catching up on each other, as we were doing with a lot of, friends during that time, during lockdown. We're like reaching out to people we hadn't reached out to in a really long time, just saying, hey, how are you guys faring? And so you and I kind of reconnected through that time. Yep. Eventually you came out to visit me in Wisconsin. Yes. And then it got to a point where summer, I believe, of 2021, the webinar company I was working for sold off approximately half of their brands. Mm-hmm. So this felt like a warning shot.
Yes.
And I became aware that once again, I was going to have to pivot. So I just reached out to you just saying, hey, do you need any admin work? Just some contract admin work. I can organize your drive. I can do this, that. And you said yes. And so it's just started as total, just, detail work, admin work. And you're like, well, this is what I can give you. I don't really know what I can do beyond this, but we'll just kind of go with it. And here we are just about 2 years later. And now I'm the podcast producer.
Yes. And our organization just growth exploded. It was synergistic. God, the universe aligned all of the pieces. And I have more than kept you busy.
That is so true.
Since that time.
And I thank you.
Wearing multiple hats. And one of the things that when I have been building out this team, one of the things that I really look for first is values alignment. Is this a person that has values alignment? And being that I have the benefit of knowing you for, how long have we been friends now?
It's been 10 years. Thank you, Facebook memories. It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years.
Yes, 10 years. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Since Kate is the baby, is 10.
That's true.
Kate was tiny when I met you. So
that's right.
Yep. Her baby.
Yes,
not my baby.
My baby Kate. So. Yes. Yes.
So I knew that we had this values alignment. And I also knew that you are an intensely creative person and you feel that there's a few stereotypes about creatives, deep feelers. They see the world through a different lens. Their brain just kind of works in a little bit different way than the rest of us. And we need our artists. I mean, we need you desperately. You bring so much beauty into the world. And Mary, you definitely fit the stereotype in all the beautiful good ways of being a creative. And so inviting you in, I knew the values alignment was there. I knew you were creative. And I also had a feeling you probably weren't going to love doing details work for a long time and that you might be more interested in higher level strategy. But what I think has been just an absolute gift to watch is you realizing that for yourself. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. No, well, you're so right. I initially came in thinking I am all about the details. And it's true. I am a very detail-oriented person. I'm very comfortable with the minutia. And I do have an organizational side.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy that. I can deeply appreciate a well-organized system of just about anything. But to tell the absolute truth would be I was afraid of anything bigger picture, anything more strategic, because I was so afraid of failing and that I wouldn't be able to handle it and that it was just simply too big for what I could do. And so detail work feels safe to me. But you're absolutely right. It didn't take long for me to get to the point of where I was like, wow, I really do not want to do admin for the rest of my life. Like this, it's fine. I can do it, but it's after a while I just felt the itch for a lot more. Didn't quite know what that was at first. The podcast certainly was not in our sights at that time, but yeah, it truly was a fear thing. Like I don't want to take on anything big and strategic because, I could fail, but the fear of that has greatly diminished over time. And I'm finding myself more and more fond of flinging myself off of theoretical cliffs into things that I just, whatever it is, I can learn it.
I love that. And I've loved having a front seat to watch that. So something people may or may not know about our team is we have part of the team that is W-2 and part of the team that's contract workers. And one of the things that I always encourage our people to talk about is not just what's happening professionally for you in our business, in the collective, in the Transcend Leadership Collective. When we're doing check-ins, we want to hear when Mary has a show coming up, which she does tomorrow. We want to know there's this show coming up and it has really nothing to do with us as a collective, but we want to hear about that business. And we just have our space, literally a space where instead of operating from a place of scarcity and feeling like, oh, if they're doing other things, they can't possibly be focusing on the business, or I don't want to encourage them talking about their other passions because it's taking away. I don't want to quote unquote pay for that for my time, blah, blah. And I decided, well, first of all, I was just like, I think that approach to leadership is completely antithetical to how we are with being able to bring your full authentic self. But also what's been like so unbelievably life-giving for all of us is what we call our dreamatorium space, which is a Voxer thread, or, for those of you think like Slack or Basecamp or whatever you use for your communication, that's what we use. We don't get sponsored, but Voxer, if you're listening, hit me up. So Mary, how would you describe what the heck is the Dreamatorium and how does it connect to everything I just was rambling about?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that. I love the Dreamatorium so much. I just have to say, the Dreamatorium is a life-giving thread in our Voxer chats where we contribute our big, crazy, pie-in-the-sky, audacious dreams that may or may not have anything to do with our day-to-day work. It is a really wonderful, truly safe space where we have another artist on the team, a true artist, a visual artist, Kathy, whose work is gorgeous and amazing. And we can share, I feel free. I feel like I have the freedom to share dreams I have about music. And boy, do I have a lot of dreams about music. And Kathy has shared things before about putting on a particular type of art show. And we all are able to kind of just dream dump in there. And so much of it is just about having the courage to speak a desire, to speak a dream. And I think there's so much power to speaking things into existence, so to speak. It's like, I said it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's out there. And being a part of the team at Transcend is unlike any other, is a completely different experience than I've ever had. And having our check-ins at the beginning of the meetings where we share a personal win, a professional win, I always feel free to share what amazing thing happened, like with music this week. And just last week, I shared that I wrote a new song. And I never would have shared that in any other type of job I've had. It's just, nope, that's not the place for it. But this is a place where I truly feel our very unique backgrounds. We're all very different individuals. Our unique backgrounds are not just recognized, but they are celebrated, they're encouraged. And I really do believe that I am able to do all the things that I love to do and I'm passionate about and that I want to pursue because of the encouragement of Transcend, of you, Lacey, and being a part of the team. It's very unusual and I don't take any of it for granted. It's really great.
I love your explanation of it. And it's life-giving for me because I hear your ideas and I get you, and you all inspire me to be like, okay, I didn't think I get aha moments, or I just get excited because I love celebrating all of you. And the other thing it gives me is I'm thinking, how can I create a win for you? If I know you're working towards a specific goal, then I'm going to be thinking, if the opportunity presents itself, I'm going to be like, oh, click. She said she wanted to do more of this, which is how we got you in the podcast producer seat.
That is exactly how it happened.
Yes, was you having these big, great, amazing, beautiful dreams and me going, I think there's a link here. And I want anyone on my team to be operating in at least 80% of the time in their zone of genius. And so I can't know what that is and what lights you up if I'm not literally creating a place for it to go and encouraging it as an enrichment and not viewing it as a threat of, gosh, I don't want to quote unquote distract from the real work. No, it's all the real work. And when I'm sitting in the seat of leadership, encouraging, developing, holding my people with an open hand is my primary work. So
yes. Yeah, absolutely. That this idea of the real work versus superfluous, and also what you said about, seeing these things as threats versus they're all entwined. They all kind of give life to each other. It's kind of like a self-renewing resource.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, Mary, I know we've got some good conversation to talk about around the confession, the confessional that we invite people into every week. And I think they're laying out contextually where things are at, where you've been. This is going to even carry more weight as you share what is the mistake that you've made that you are like, man, if I could spare someone this pain or help them get through it faster, what is it that you're bringing to the table for us to talk about today?
Well, the trick was narrowing it down. Because there are so many big fat mistakes I've made throughout my life. And as I was thinking about what to talk about, it took me some time, certainly, to narrow it down. But I think the biggest thing that I can think about is I spent so much of my life playing small, shrinking myself so that others around me could feel more comfortable, so they could feel safe. And this isn't just about what we understand as kind of the typical idea of like shrinking ourselves. This goes into things like diminishing your basic needs. Like, I don't need everyone else. I will take care of their needs, but I don't have needs, which is a really fast track to burnout, exhaustion, resentment, so much resentment. And because it doesn't just stop at diminishing your needs, it snowballs into you diminish your dreams, you diminish your gifts, everything you were created to do to the absolute fullest of your ability. You start to crush all of those things. And when you do that, when you crush your own dreams, when you just put a total lid on your desires, your gifts, you are no good to those around you. Really, you're not. It's not this beautiful self-sacrificial thing. It's not. That's a really hard pill to swallow. It was for me. I know that could be a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but it does not make you this, great martyr of an individual. When you are crushing the thing that you were created to do, you cannot be to exist in the fullest version of yourself as, mother, father, partner, sister, brother, friend, neighbor, human. None of those things can ever be fully lived into if you are just constantly shrinking yourself, diminishing your need. The snowball effect is real, and it just spills into every area of your life. And there was a time in my life where it seems wild to think about that this actually happened, but there was a significant amount of time in my life where I wasn't playing music at all. I was barely listening to music. I was barely playing piano. And I went through a significant stage where I didn't touch the piano for months, it's unthinkable to me now to think of. I mean, I play piano every day, multiple times a day, most of the time. Yeah. And I sing every day. And creativity. Well, I'm gonna get ahead of myself here, so I'm gonna put a little pause on that. And I just want to say that I had worked myself. I was in a really difficult marriage, and that has thus ended. It's been about 7 years, and so there was so many just like soul crushing difficulties in that, and heartbreak. So I certainly wasn't in a good place overall, but I really crushed like the thing that gave me really the most life. Yeah. And creativity is also a self-renewing resource. Certainly it's one of those things where absolutely the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And I think so much about this idea. Every day I think about, am I completely committed to the creative process? I think especially in our culture, we get really attached to the idea of beginnings and ends. Like when I say the words creative process, we so often want to attach to it the creative process from beginning to end. And that's really a misnomer, because the creative process in its purest form, it has no end. But it's only if you contribute to it. If you're putting into the creative process, then it continues to just grow and grow and grow. And when we put an end to it, we're getting attached to results. Yeah. And when we get attached to an end result, we really are doing ourselves a disservice. If you're not in love with the process, and of course, this is not to say that you don't encounter difficulties along the way, you do. Right. But if you are not in love with the process, if you're not, it will be very hard to sustain that. Yeah. And I found myself in this place of there was nothing going into that creative process. And I just kind of felt like I was slowly evaporating.
That was a lot.
Yes.
Very profound statements in there. I think we could talk for 5 hours to just unpack that last statement, or those last statements you made. How did you, so for a long time, you lived in this horrible space where and it sounds like it did snowball. It started as an idea and then as the seed of what you were supposed to be like. And it wasn't really in alignment with the true you, but you kept pushing that down, pushing that down, pushing that down. When did the dam break? Was it a moment? Was it a series of compounding? Like, do you have a stark catalyst or point in time? Tell us about that. How did you know?
Sure. Yeah. No, that is a great question. question, there was definitely, this is kind of like part 2 of terrible mistakes. And the first was the shrinking yourself, diminishing yourself to, I don't have needs. There's a part 2 to that. And that is, for a very long time, for years, like I would not tell myself the truth about my life, my situation. I absolutely refuse to tell myself the truth.
Can you give us like a tiny example of whatever you want to share of what not telling yourself the truth means and actually looks like in your experience?
So I can think of lots of things. The tricky thing is narrowing it down. But when when I had experienced numerous types of situations where I became very aware that my safety and the safety of my children were definitely needed to be called into question. And those are very hard things to accept. When you have family members expressing their concern, saying, we're very worried about you, we're worried about the situation, we're worried about how far this could go, and they're not being shy about it. They're basically pleading with you to take an honest look at your life and what's happening. Eventually, things certainly did come to a head, and my marriage began to completely break down. But it was also around that time where I started to sit at the piano again. And I said to myself, no matter how much it hurts, you sit, you play. And that was a big part of avoiding it too. It was wonderful to play, but it was also so excruciating. I could barely do it. But it all kind of coincided with, I began to tell myself the truth about what was going on in my life and facing it and starting to take actionable steps to getting myself and my kids to a safer place in life. And then I begin to, again, right around that time, then I began to sit, I began to play, I started writing. And at that point, that was probably about 8-9 years ago where I started writing. Now, none of that stuff I would ever publish in a million years now. But it had to be done. Yeah. It had to be expressed. That's a big part of what got me out of that and back into living a life full of music, creativity. It's all so deeply intertwined. Like they really are so connected, like what was happening in my life and the kids and where we are today.
Yes. If there's someone listening and they're like, I know I probably am not telling myself the truth, or I feel like I'm in this, but I'm so scared to really look at it, but they feel it. What encouraging words would you give them for the next step to take? Not in the creative process of getting out of the hole, so to speak. What step would you say, just take this step next?
Well, first, I just want to say, I know how incredibly hard and honestly terrifying it can be to find yourself in that position. And of course, this can be a lot of different things. We're not just talking about relationships, but it can be so terrifying to imagine that you might need to upend your life in some way once you start telling yourself the truth. And when it comes to taking that first step, I would just encourage you to, this is not going to sound very groundbreaking, but it really just starts with, I will do one thing, one tiny thing to move myself in this direction. I don't know what that thing might look like for you. It might look like making a simple phone call to get some wise counsel. Certainly, I would encourage you, don't do it alone. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying to figure out, whatever really difficult thing you're trying to work through because you finally told yourself the truth about something, don't do it alone. And you will figure out very quickly who you can talk to and who you can't talk to. That will happen, and that's okay. But just to start with one very small task a day. And you have to kind of just put it out there and be like, okay, I'm going to try this thing. If this works, then I'll move on to the next step. If this works, I'll move on to the next step. And I promise you will be extremely surprised. You will find that in so many ways, the universe opens itself up to you in bizarre and unexpected ways. But it is very scary and you have to take a leap. But people will catch you. I promise. People will catch you.
I love that. One of the hardest questions that I try to make a regular habit of asking myself, there's two, especially when I feel stuck or I feel like, am I on the edges of dancing around with this not being honest with myself thing, because we like to repeat patterns. So maybe it's not going to look as extreme, but I definitely have had, in my own very different way, different story, have had times of not being honest with myself. And the two questions that are just absolute like gut punch check for me. The first one is, what am I pretending I don't see? What am I pretending I don't see? And then the second follow up to that is, and what am I pretending that I don't know? And if I just sit with those for a while, it's super uncomfortable. Even now, even just saying it out loud on the podcast and like knowing there's some things that I'm weighing in my mind right now, I'm like, oh God, I have to go through this again. With decisions and making tough choices. This time it's all for good stuff, but it's scary good stuff. So what is it that I'm pretending I don't see? What is it I'm pretending I don't know? Those are such brutal questions. And I love, Mary, that you said, but don't do this alone. Don't think you have to sit with it alone. When you said there's people that you can talk to and you'll figure that out really quickly, what are the green flags? So what are like, yes, these are the people that you want to lean into hard during this time where you're working through some stuff?
Yeah, that is a really good question. Green flags, when they are truly listening to you, it's a simple thing, but just the sheer fact, like if they're not interrupting you and like, well, what about this? Well, what about this? And did you try this? Did you try this? That's a red flag. I can't tell you that. But if someone, I mean, we all know when someone is really listening to us and we are truly being heard and we're being seen, if you can tell that a person is really listening, they're deeply invested in what you have to say, and that they genuinely care about you. They care about you more than a position, an institution, fill in the blank, when there are other things, quote, at stake. And also, spoiler alert, so many things aren't really at stake. It's, their safety and living a life full of goodness and joy. That's really what's at stake.
Yeah. I love that. How would you connect I'm making the connection. I want to hear how your brain is connecting it. Talking about leaning into and committing to falling in love and valuing the creative process and understanding and not having the end in mind, but just enjoying the journey and learning to love the process. How does that connect with learning to let yourself have permission to live a big, beautiful life? Where are those connections?
Well, I think you have to become comfortable with the idea that there isn't a tidy little bow we can put on everything in our life. And I will say, as someone who I was initially a classically trained pianist, really high level of achievement, perfection, interpretation, and it's wonderful and I love it. And it's a huge part of who I am as a musician. Like there's a part of me that's always going to lean into that part of the excellence and, technique of a classical musician. But so often what are we doing? We're preparing for a concert. We're preparing for a recital, and concerts and recitals come to an end. Yeah. And it's like, I did this big, huge thing and it's over. And then you have performer's depression, but we won't talk about that right now. And then you start looking for the next big thing. Also won't talk about that right now. But if you can really become comfortable with the fact that there really isn't an end in sight, and I have to say, as I have gotten more into the world of songwriting, arranging, working with another musician in a collaborative sense. Hi, Leaf. This is Mary speaking. And Leaf and I, we have our band, The Number of Months, which you hear us talk about at the end of every episode of Confessions of a Terrible Leader.
Oh, listen.
But I've learned, Yes. So I've learned so much about really being comfortable with a song is never really done. Even once you record it and you send it out into the world, it can be very easy to just kind of, well, that's done. That's finished. Great. On to the next thing. But a song is never really done. You can always do a cover of your own song. Did you know that?
Taylor's version?
Of course you can. Exactly. So I think in life and in our process, it's like, hey, you know what? Make a cover tune. Yeah. It doesn't have to be over. I love that. Even if it's a cover tune of your own composition, that is beautiful. And it's just another way of it's about seeing things from a different angle, seeing things differently, different perspective. And there's so many different ways to see something. And can you be open to that?
I think that's a perfect place to end. That's beautiful. Mary, thank you. Thank you so much for coming today, for agreeing to be on the show, getting on the other side of the mic. I want the whole world to know where to find the number of months, where to find you, where can they connect with you? And do you have anything coming up that you're excited about?
Yes. Well, funny you should mention that. We have a performance tomorrow night at the Kenosha Creative Space. We're over the moon excited about it. It's a really wonderful organization. They do so much in the community to bring amazing art and culture to our downtown and the community. So we'll be performing tomorrow night at the Kenosha Creative Space. You can find them on Facebook. They're very often streaming their events on Facebook. Our website is thenumberofmonths.com. We have some songs on there you can listen to for free. You do not have to purchase them, but if you would like to, you certainly can. I'm not going to stop you. And we just have so many more exciting things in the works. Like we certainly have an album on the horizon and possibly two. Yes, lots of exciting and creative things in the works. We are also on Instagram at The Number of Months and on Facebook and YouTube as The Number of Months. So
okay, I love the consistency.
Yep, it's very, of course, it's details.
Yes. And please, she's the one that's going to do this. Link yourself in the show notes. So
I will.
Drop all of those links. And thank you. Thank you. This was a beautiful conversation. I feel so extremely privileged to work with you on the team, to call you friend, and just thank you so much, Mary, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Lacey. This was an amazing conversation, and I so appreciate everything. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Until next time, friends, go manage like a leader.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If you are in the early stages of leadership, or you are currently in a leadership position and are supervising rising leaders within your organization, you are going to want to learn more about our virtual live community created specifically for emerging leaders. Our first virtual cohort begins on April 16th. And remember, this is a live virtual community, so you can sign up from anywhere. You will be connecting with other heart-first leadership-minded individuals and learning together. Sign up for our free newsletter, the link is in the show notes, to be the first to know when registration goes live and receive first access. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Lacey Nelson and produced by Mary Skop. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Skop from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, go manage like a leader.